Welcome to TransActioner, modern contract software for real estate transactions. This presentation is specifically for the transaction coordinators. So some of the highlights for TransActioner include a client portal where your buyers and sellers can fill out forms, sign documents, download, as well as have a real-time calendar that's always up to date and a list of contacts for the transaction. You can share documents with simply a click of a button, extract deadlines from any PDF, even handwritten dates. TransActioner works great on phones for both the agents and for their clients, the buyers and sellers. There's no app needed, it just works. TransActioner does signature tracking and is more secure. Quick snapshot, taking a look at the agent view on the left is the overview page when they first log in. On the right is the transaction overview, which as a TC you will also see. The documents page where we have all the documents and the status of the signatures as well as who it's been shared with. An up-to-date real-time calendar, formatted forms make it a little easier to read, and a quick snapshot of the client portal. When they first log in, if they have multiple transactions in TransActioner, they can select which transaction they wish to look at. They have an up-to-date calendar. They have a list of documents they need to sign, as well as they can view, fill out forms, and download. So let's take a look at the TC experience. First and foremost, as a TC, you need to be set up inside TransActioner to specifically be designated a TC. This is so we can verify accounts and security purposes. Then, whenever someone adds you as a TC, you will be notified and you will have access to their transaction. Note, you cannot use your TC account as an agent. If you are a transaction coordinator and an agent who has your own transactions, you will need a separate email with a paid TransActioner account to do your work as an agent. The TC account is specifically set up as a TC and cannot create new transactions. Now, for the TC, for a transaction coordinator, there are two different experiences you will see. One is when the agent you support is a paid subscriber of TransActioner. The second one is when the agent you are supporting is not a paid subscriber on TransActioner. So some transaction coordinators work with an entire office, and you may only be working with agents who are paid subscribers. If you are a transaction coordinator working across the state for multiple brokerages and different agents, then you may also be working with agents who are not on TransActioner. And what do you do when you receive documents from an agent on TransActioner if your agent is not on TransActioner? We will cover both in this presentation. So the first scenario, the agent you support is a paid subscriber of TransActioner. Yay! As a transaction coordinator for agents who are paid subscribers of TransActioner, you want to access your login page one of two ways. You can always go to transactioner.com, our main webpage, click the login button in the upper right, and that will take you to the app.transactioner.com website. This is the main login page. You can also go directly to app.transactioner.com to log in. It's really worth bookmarking this page because this is where you will frequently go. These two login pages will give you access to all the transactions where you were added as a TC and the agent you support is a paying subscriber for TransActioner. We'll take a look on some later slides about how to access documents when the agent you are supporting is not a TransActioner subscriber. So let's start with the overview page. As a transaction coordinator, you have a different overview page when you first log in. You're going to see a 4-day calendar of tasks and deadlines across all the transactions where the agent is a paid subscriber of TransActioner. So here we focus in on yesterday, today, and the next 2 days. Each entry in this calendar will show you the address, the first line of the address, the list of deadlines, and a menu. The little triangles are menus. It will show you LA or BA, whether you are supporting the listing agent or the buyer agent for this transaction, and the agent's name. If a closing date is available, you will also see the closing date. The color coding is based on each deadline and its status. Red means it's past due and not complete. Blue means it has not been completed yet. And green is designated complete. For each deadline, there is a drop-down menu to the right of the deadline title. This drop-down menu has options to view the transaction, mark the deadline complete, edit the deadline, archive, or delete. When you click on View Transaction, it will take you to the Transactions Overview page, which is the same experience as the agent has. If you were to mark Complete, the deadline will then be marked as complete and the text color will become green. A completed deadline can also be marked incomplete. When you click on Edit, a pop-up appears for you to edit the deadline details, including the date. For Archive and Delete, Archive will remove from the calendars and upcoming deadlines, but will continue to store that information with the transaction, which is great for record keeping. And you can unarchive if needed. When you delete, you're removing entirely from the transaction and the system, and this cannot be undone. So let's take a look at the transaction page. As a transaction coordinator, up at the top, you see the transaction button as one of your options. When you click on that, you'll come into a page with all the transactions that you have access to. They are designated based on the status. So the under contract is up top, then active listings, and then active buyers. Based on the button that's selected at the top, by default, you will see all the active transactions, including the active listings, active buyers, and any that are under contract. If you click the All button, you will also be able to see archived and complete transactions. You can search on many different fields for the transaction. You can search for first and last name of either client, the agent first name or last name, and for the address, you can start searching based on the number, the street name, the city, or the zip code. The column headings under the under contract list of transactions include the agent's first name, last name, transaction name, the client first and last name, and is the agent representing the buyer or the seller. It also includes the full address as well as closing date. For active listings and active buyers, you're going to see the agent's first and last name, transaction name, both clients' first and last names, the address, and for listings, we'll show the days on market. For active buyers, it will show how long they've been actively looking. So now we have the People page. At the top menu, your third option at the top is the People menu option. Adding people to your People's page make it easier when you need to add people to a transaction. So typically, any title company, closers, and lenders that you use quite frequently, it's worth adding them into your People tab, because then when you're inside a transaction, if you need to add a title company to a transaction, you can simply select them from the drop-down list and it will auto-populate all their details for you. So it makes life a lot easier. So this is what it looks like when adding parties from existing people from your People's page. When you go to add a party, you're going to select first what their role is. So if they're title company or lender, for example. And then the next drop-down is an option to select from one of your People tab. And this will filter out, if you select the title company, it'll filter out all the title people into that drop-down list. Just helps you to be more efficient while you work. Agents and especially TCs will want to pre-populate your commonly used title closers and lenders to help you be more efficient. Now, when an agent first logs in, their agent dashboard is different than the transaction coordinator's dashboard. It's always worth knowing what the agent's going to see when it's different from what the transaction coordinator you will see. So that is why I'm showing this to you. What the agent dashboard is when they first log in, you can see it's different than what the transaction coordinator sees, which was the calendar view. But that way you can still communicate with your agents and understand what they see when they first log in. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the transaction. So when you get to View Transaction, it's going to bring you into the Transaction Overview page. On this overview page, you can see we've got a bunch of transaction details. We've got the seller information up at the top. We've got the address, the image, the sales price if it has been added, including the contract date and closing date, and quick reference to the buyer agent and their information. You've got your calendar for the next 4 days of upcoming deadlines, a list of the upcoming deadlines, and documents still awaiting signature. So it's a really nice overview of everything going on in that particular transaction. The heart of our transactions as real estate agents are the documents. And inside TransActioner, we keep track of the status based on the signatures and who has access to each document. So each document can be shared with the parties that are set up in the parties section of a transaction, and their buttons will show up to the right of each of the transaction documents, and the color coding will help us know how those documents are shared with that particular person. To get those buttons to show up on the documents page, you need to add people to the parties section of a transaction. On the menu option on the left will be the parties menu option that you will select. to bring you to the parties page. Your clients are up at the top, whether they are the sellers in this example, or it would be the buyers if you're working with a buyer. You can add new parties by clicking the plus sign next to the other parties, and you will want to add the names of the other side's clients so that forms will be auto-populated with their names. So if you add people in your people page, then when you add a party to the parties page, you can reference them from that drop-down list. Now, the way it should look, you are a transaction coordinator, so you will be added as a transaction coordinator in the parties section. If you are adding the other agent's transaction coordinator or their assistant, you're going to do so inside their agent's details. So you can click on edit for the listing agent, and there are checkboxes to designate the assistant and the transaction coordinator for the other side. That is where you will add the TC and assistant for the listing agent or the other side's agent. So on your parties page, you will see you've got your clients up at the top, listing agent, lender, title company. There could be other escrow parties and attorneys. These parties listed in the transaction in the parties page will get buttons on the documents page and the deadlines page for you to share with. People such as the other agent's clients will not have buttons because you are not working directly with them. You will not be sharing directly to the other agent's clients. You can delete people from the transactions parties by clicking the edit icon to go look at that particular party. And then at the bottom left is a trash can, and that's where you can delete a party from the transaction. We do have linking in TransActioner when both agents on either side are subscribed users of TransActioner. When the transaction is linked with another agent on TransActioner, the assistant and the transaction coordinator details on the parties page is for your information only, in that when you share documents with the listing agent, typically that as their assistant and TC will also get notified and be able to access those documents. But if it's a linked transaction, then the other side's agent is in charge of designating the assistant and TC for their side because they have an account in TransActioner. And that's how their assistant and TC will be notified, is based on the other agent doing their part to designate who is involved in the transaction on their side. Now, if the other side is not linked, then you do need to set this up. So if the other agent is not on TransActioner, you do want to make sure you set up the assistant and the TC for the other agent so that they do get notifications whenever you share documents with the other side's agent. So those notifications are automatic. Now, how does linking work? If the other agent has an account on TransActioner, the MLS number has to match to a transaction that they have set up inside TransActioner, and the email you entered in the parties has to match the email that they use to log into TransActioner. So if you're having a problem with linking the transaction, you want to check, make sure that you've got the right email, the one that they're logging into TransActioner with, and the MLS number. Sometimes for transactions, there are multiple MLS numbers. You want to make sure that you've got at least one of those. For listing agents, if they have multiple MLS numbers, they want to make sure they set up both MLS numbers inside TransActioner so that buyer agents who may have access to one or the other can find and link the transaction. Each side will link separately. So once you try to share a document with the other agent or share documents back with the other agent, then you'll have to make sure that the parties, that the other agent is set up correctly in the parties and to be able to make the link. Once you add a party to the parties page, then their button will appear in the documents page and the deadlines page. Only the relevant party buttons are shown. TCs and assistants will automatically be receiving notifications based on their supported agent being notified or documents shared with them. The other side's clients, you don't have access to simply share with them. That is the role for the other agent to do. So those buttons will not show up either. So your clients will show up. You can still add the other side's clients into the parties so that the forms will auto-populate, but their buttons will not show up because you should not be directly contacting the other agents. These buttons also appear for the deadlines. For tasks and deadlines, you can also share by clicking the button for each of the parties that you wish to share that deadline or task with. All the buttons are always the role of the person in the transaction. So that's easier to remember what's going on. If you forget who buyer number 2 is, if you hover your mouse over that button for any of the buttons, it will remind you who that person is. Now, sharing, the way sharing works, you can share by either sending a document out for signatures or share by clicking their button. So when a button is gray, it means they are not shared. That person, that party person, cannot see that document. When you send a document out for signatures, their button turns orange. So it's very clear to everyone whether that person has signed the document or not. When a client has signed a document, their button will turn green. Once all parties who need to sign a document have signed, the status for the document will change from awaiting signatures to signing complete. Now, if you just click a button, their button turns blue, and that person can view that document or download the document. So for your clients, you're typically sending documents out for signatures and not clicking their button. However, there are scenarios where you do want to click the button to share with the buyer or your seller, your clients. For example, if you would like your seller to fill out the seller's property disclosure, if you click their button, then they will have an option to fill out the seller's property disclosure. If you would like your seller to review all the multitude of offers that you have received and you don't want them to sign any of them, you can click the seller's buttons, your client's buttons, so they can view those documents without being able to sign them. This is also great even for buyers if you would like them to review something like maybe an exclusive right to buy or sell or the CBS, the contract to buy and sell, without requesting signatures from them. They can simply view the document if you click their button. Now you can also unshare documents by clicking their button to turn the button gray, because when the button is gray, they cannot view or access the documents. Now, when the party has a TransActioner account, they receive a copy of shared documents. These are shown in purple. If you make changes to this document, you can reshare with them by double-clicking their button, and they will receive another copy of the document with the changes. Because they have a copy of the document, you are unable to unshare documents when the button is purple. This is set up this way partly for the security and integrity of the data, as well as a better experience for agents who subscribe to TransActioner. Okay, so what happens when you send for signatures or share a document? So when you share or send for signing, they're going to receive an email notifying them either they have documents they need to sign or new documents were shared with them. And then the button will either be signed documents or view documents. And this is going to take them to their portal to log in. This is going to be the same for clients, the buyers and sellers, as well as title, closers, lenders, anyone who doesn't have an account on TransActioner, including if the other agent on the other side does not have a TransActioner account, this is the same experience that they're going to have, this whole client portal. The email is going to bring them to a specific website for them to log in. If it's their first time logging into TransActioner, they need to use the link from the email. Once they have a password, in the future, they can log in by clicking on the link from any of the emails or going to transactioner.com, clicking the login button and logging in from there. When a client logs in and they have multiple transactions going on in TransActioner, for example, a seller who's also trying to buy at the same time, they have two transactions going on, then they will be brought to their transaction list where they can select the transaction they wish to work on. This is really important for people like title and lender who typically have multiple transactions going on. And this will give them an opportunity to pick which transaction they wish to work on. If they log in and they don't have multiple transactions going on, they automatically skip this page because it's unnecessary. Then they go to the documents page. Here we have the documents where they can sign, view, fill out forms, and download. In the top in the bright, bold orange lets them know they still need to sign a document. And they will always know if they didn't do it right because it stays up there in the bright orange, meaning they haven't finished the signatures. Down below are all the shared documents for this particular transaction. Once they sign a document, it also gets added down to the bottom in the shared documents section. Here they can view and download documents, and for forms such as the seller's property disclosure, if you share it with them by clicking their button, then they will have a fill out button where they can fill it out right on their portal. This experience is pretty amazing. When we've had a client running the Boulder wearing pink tutus with all her friends, and at the end of the run at the stadium, she had to sign some documents. And she's showing off to all her friends how easy it is to sign these documents just by logging into this portal. It was really obvious and easy to use. It's a great way for agents to get referrals. On this page for these documents requesting signatures, there is an opportunity for you to provide a little note, and this can be multiple lines as well, typically used to help describe what this document is. You could specify your signatures acknowledging receipt of this disclosure. You could say on a CBS, this is the revised contract to buy and sell with the new price, or things like that. And then when they click the sign button, it takes them into the document where they can scroll up and down. They can zoom in and out. If they click on the sign here in the box, a pop-up will come up where they can confirm their signing details and pick a signature style, one of 3 options. If they are a trustee for a trust or manager of an LLC, they can add that at the end of their full name. They need some kind of designation at the end of their signature. Once they click submit, they have actually signed the document, and you as the agent and TC will receive an email notifying you that they have signed this document. On the bottom of the documents page, they can view and download, and the SPD can be filled out, or other forms where the client's supposed to fill out those documents. And here is what the SPD looks like, where the client is filling it out themselves, and then they click the save button to save it when they're done. They also have a calendar that's always up to date. So anytime you add a deadline or task and share it with your clients, it will automatically update their real-time calendar in here. And they can click on a calendar entry to get a little more information about it. There's also a contacts page for the clients where they can access information about the other parties in the transaction. These will always be the relevant parties to the role of the person looking at the contacts page. Now, this whole experience of logging into this portal, this client portal, is the same for title closers and lenders and anyone else who doesn't have a TransActioner account. This is how they will access their documents. As a transaction coordinator, if the agent you're supporting does not have a TransActioner account, you will also go through this same process to access the documents for that transaction. And the client portal works great on phones, very easy to use. Document options. So let's take a look at the documents page again, and there's a drop down on the right of all the documents. And in this drop down, we have an option to view the document, which will look at the PDF with the content filled in a non-edit mode. Fill out allows you to edit the fields in the document. Prepare signatures allows you to go and review the signature fields, modify or add signature fields, and then you can send for signing from there. Download allows you to download it to your computer. Extract deadlines will bring a pop-up up to extract deadlines to add to your calendar. Copy form versus duplicate. Copy form is going to make a copy where you can go back into edit mode. So you need to be able to edit the fields again and remove any signatures because you're changing what the document is, which they have not yet agreed to yet. Duplicate makes a copy with the signatures in place so you can add additional signatures. This is important on the inspection objection notice specifically, where the buyers have already signed the objection, you've shared that with the listing side, and now they're going to withdraw the inspection objection. Their signatures still need to be there, and then you add their signatures to the withdraw section of that document. You can also use the duplicate if the agent forgets to sign the document and sent it out for signatures to their clients, and they need to go back and add their signature as well. This is a way to do that with the duplicate feature. Archive will move the document to the bottom of the documents page below the active documents. It's a great way to keep the documents in with the transaction for record keeping and reference, but you know it's not part of the active transaction going on right now. Great for rejected offers if you re-edit an offer, anything that was previously signed and you want to keep a copy of that, but it's not actually active. Template. So agents can make their own form templates as well as transaction coordinators can do so as well. To create a template, you'll go to the upper right corner by your name, click on the drop down, and there is an option for templates. You'll have a list of your form templates there. When you first start out, you may not have any. You're going to click on the Add Template button, and then you'll see a pop-up appear with all the documents available for creating as a template. If any are missing, let us know because we can very easily add other documents to be templates. We also have from that list the closing instructions and the source of water as options to be templates as well. When you have a list of templates, the drop-down options on each template you can fill out, make a copy, rename, and delete. Inside the transaction documents page, you can add documents, select state forms, click on the templates option up at the top, and you will see all your templates available, and you can select your template you wish to add to your transaction. Sending offers. This slide is an overview, kind of high-level steps for offers. You're going to enter a transaction for your client as the buyer, set up the transaction specifically for this property. You need the address. You're going to go to the parties page, make sure the listing agent and the seller's names are set up as separate parties. That way you have the autofill feature working when you create your forms. You're going to go create the offer, which is typically come based on one of your templates. The agent is going to sign their name on that offer. You're going to send to your clients for signature. You will receive an email when each client signs, and then share with the listing agent by clicking their button. To get into more detail about our offer transaction, there's 3 scenarios that the agent can be in when they want to create an offer for their buyer. The first situation is they haven't created a transaction yet for your buyer. Second one is they've created a transaction for the buyer and maybe had the buyer sign an exclusive right to buy, but they didn't have a property yet. They were just shopping still. And in the third scenario, they have already submitted an offer for that buyer, but it was on a different property. So we want to talk about what is the best practice for moving forward with this buyer setting up the transaction inside TransActioner. So the first scenario, you haven't created a transaction yet for your buyer. Here we want to create a new transaction for that buyer because we don't have any transactions set up and ready to go for that buyer. Now the agent needs to do this because as a transaction coordinator, you cannot create new transactions. So you're going to have to ask the agent to create a new transaction for this particular buyer and to add you as a transaction coordinator as one of the parties so that you have access to this transaction. Then you can take it on from there. And then what you can do is when you get in there, you're going to go to the transaction overview page, click edit, and then import the MLS number in there. Now the second scenario is you've already created a transaction for this buyer, but you didn't have a property yet. And so as long as you're listed as a transaction coordinator for this buyer, you have access to the transaction. So here you're going to go into that transactions overview page. This is where you click on the edit icon for the transaction's details and enter the MLS number and click Import MLS. You can also just enter the address information, especially if the property is not on the MLS or it's in an MLS that the agent doesn't have access to. Always verify the legal description is correct. And the third scenario is where this buyer has already submitted an offer for a different property. Now, the best option for this is to go ahead and create a new transaction for this buyer. It's much easier to just keep that old transaction and archive it and just keep it for your records and then start a new transaction for this specific new property. Of course, you are a transaction coordinator, so just like before, the agent needs to create the new transaction and then add you as a TC for that new transaction for this particular property. Now, once you are in the transaction and getting ready for this particular offer, go to the parties page and make sure the listing agent is correct. You can add a listing agent if it did not get imported from the MLS, and add each seller as a separate party so that all the forms will auto-populate their name so you don't have to type that in yourself. Now, here are the 5 pages going in a lot more detail on creating that offer. I realize some transaction coordinators don't work on the offer and only get added once they are under contract, but some transaction coordinators do help agents with their offers. And so I have this in here just in case. It also gives you a good idea of just walking through, working on forms and some of the scenarios that can come up. So we're assuming you're starting inside a transaction on the documents page. You're going to click the Add Documents button, and select the Colorado Forms button on the right in the pop-up. This will bring you to all the standard Colorado State form documents and any brokerage forms that we have for this agent. You're going to click the Add button for any forms you need to add to this transaction. Most agents and TCs use templates, especially for the contract to buy and sell real estate. So click on the templates bar on the top and it will display all the templates that you have and you can select from there. Once you've selected all the documents you'd like to add to the transaction, click the Done button. Now you're going to click on the drop down to the right of the document for the CBS, Contract to Buy and Sell, and select Fill Out. And this is where you would fill out the information in here. When you are filling it out, you can, for the dates and deadlines section, click on the date column in each entry to have the date selector pop up and select the dates from there. When you're ready to send it for signatures, have the agent sign their name and date. Agents can do this by typing in their name and selecting the date. Click Prepare for Signing button in the lower right. The form fields will be uneditable in this view, and you can see the signature fields are already positioned for your clients. All the standard forms and any brokerage forms provided to us, we have preset where all the signature fields need to be. The ones that will be shown to you are based on the transactions parties. If you're working with sellers and there are 2 sellers, you'll see the 2 signature fields, one for each seller. If you're working with sellers and there's only 1 seller in the transaction, then you'll see only the 1 set of signature fields for 1 seller. If you're working with buyers, you're going to see the buyer signature fields. You cannot set up the signature fields for the other side's clients. Now you can also drag and drop new fields, especially if you upload your own custom form. You can add signature fields, date fields, text boxes, as well as check boxes. And we'll see that in the later slide on how to add signature fields. Click the Prepare for Signing button in the lower right. The pop-up appears with a list of people set up with signature fields in the document. Based on that prior page, when you saw the signature fields, that's what determines which email addresses are showing up here based on who has a signature field in the document. Now, optionally, the add a note, the optional there, that note, if you add some information there, will show up on the client portal in the message section for each document. You are sending each document separately, and so you can define the message for each document that would be helpful for the client. If you do not put a note, you will see it'll say, please sign this document by default. Then click the Submit button to send this off. When your client gets the email, they will log into the portal, they will sign the document, and you will receive an email notification once they have signed. Once all clients have signed, then you can share with the listing agent. Do not share with the listing agent before you get the signatures. The listing agent will not see the update unless you reshare with them. So the best practice is to make sure you get the signatures first, and then you share it with the listing agent. When you're ready to share with the listing agent, you're going to click the listing agent button. If the listing agent is not on TransActioner, they will receive an email notification and they can log into their portal, which looks the same as the client portal, where they can access all the documents, calendar, and contacts that you have shared with them. If the listing agent has an account on TransActioner, they will also receive an email notification that you shared a document with them. They can log into their TransActioner account and will see your offer inside their transaction under the heading Shared. This is really important. It's a best practice. No matter what software you use, make sure you contact the listing agent to verify receipt. Things can get lost in the emails. They can go to spam folders. You always want to make sure you get a hold of the listing agent or their assistant or their TC and verify that they have indeed received your offer. Now, linking. If the other agent has an account on TransActioner and the MLS number matches and the email you entered in the party matches, first time you click the listing agent button to share a document, you will be prompted to link the transaction. Now, I covered this slide earlier, but it's worth repeating here because we are at the step in sending the offer where you will see this pop-up come up when you try to share with the listing agent. If everything is set up correctly in the parties, matching to the agent in TransActioner, you can then link the transaction. Receiving documents. You can receive documents from other platforms via email and agents on TransActioner. So the first scenario we'll look at is receiving documents via email. When you receive an email from another agent, a document that needs to go into one of your transactions, you're going to download that PDF to your computer. Inside TransActioner, you can go to that transaction, click on the Add Documents button, and then you can either drag and drop the documents onto that left button where it says Drag and Drop Files Here, or you can click on that button to select a file from your computer. Once the document is in your transaction, now you can set up for signatures, add the agent's signature, etc. Receiving documents from agents also on TransActioner. A document that comes from an agent who is also on TransActioner, when you receive that email notification that a document has been shared with you, if you log in to the transaction, you will see it on the documents page at the bottom below the active documents. You'll see a title for shared and a list of documents that have been shared with you by another agent who is also on TransActioner. Now the agent can add their signature, share with their clients for signatures, download, rename, reshare back to the other agent, etc. How to add signature fields. Add or modify signature fields for documents. This is important when you upload your own documents or documents received from other agents who are using different platforms. And you need to add the signature fields for the clients. So you're going to go into the transaction to the documents area and select prepare signatures from the drop-down. That will take you to where you can add or edit signature fields in the document. Now, if you're filling out a form, you can also get there by clicking the prepare for signing button in the lower right when you're in the edit mode of a form. By default, the signatures should be ready to go for all standard forms, including brokerage forms that we have received and processed. So for consistency, we have green for the first buyer, blue is always for the second buyer, orange is always for the first seller, and red is for the second seller. The color coding doesn't matter too much, but it does make it a lot easier to easily recognize when you're used to which colors are which, what you have inside your document. Remember, you'll only see signature fields for the parties listed. So if you only have one buyer, you're only going to see the green buyer fields. You won't see blue ones because there is no second buyer. And you also won't see signature fields for the other agent's clients. So to add or modify signature fields, on the left side is a list of signers available. Typically, agents will see me at the top with their name as an option to bring in their own signature and add text to a document. The buyers and sellers will be listed next. So you want to select the checkbox for the signer you wish to work on. And then at the top, you're going to select the option of signature, initials, date signed, text, or checkbox by dragging that option onto the document. Little tip here, make sure you're on the right page of the PDF before you start dragging. You cannot drag across different pages. So scroll to the right page of the PDF and then start dragging and dropping the signature or checkboxes. You can resize them as well by dragging on the corners. You can reposition them by dragging and dropping into a new position. And you can delete by selecting one of the fields. And then on the left menu, there will be an option with a trash can to delete from. So how to extract deadlines? So a neat feature of TransActioner is that we can also read handwritten dates, as well as deadlines coming in from other platforms. So to extract deadlines for any PDF, including other forms beyond the CBS, when you're inside a transaction on the Documents page, you're going to select the drop-down next to the document and then select Extract Deadlines. A pop-up will appear that will look for deadlines in the document. Now this is really fast when a document is from a TransActioner user. If it is from an uploaded PDF or a scanned PDF, you're going to have to wait 10 seconds, maybe a little bit longer for it to do its magic. Once the pop-up appears, you can edit the dates as needed by clicking the blue date buttons. By default, all of the deadlines will be extracted and added to your calendar. However, you can remove a deadline if you just don't care about it, such as maybe possession date. When you're ready, click on the Add Buttons button on the lower right. In order to share these deadlines, you got to go to the Deadlines section on the left menu for this transaction and share with the people within the transaction. So each party has a button for each deadline, and you can select their button and turn the button blue to show that it's been shared with that party. Typically, if the other agent is also on TransActioner, they will be extracting the deadlines themselves. But if they are not on TransActioner, the other side, the other agent, then you definitely want to share with them all the deadlines so that they have a working calendar to work from as well, and that they can screenshot it for their clients who are not on TransActioner. Next scenario, when the agent you support is not on TransActioner. So when the agent you're supporting as a transaction coordinator is not a paid subscriber of TransActioner, then you'll need to do the following. Instead of logging in from the main website, you're going to have to click on the View Documents button in the email sent from the other agent for the transaction. A shortcut to get to this that also works, if you'd like to bookmark it, is the app.transactioner.com/party login. And that's with a lowercase p and a capital L to be able to log in for all transactions where the agent you're supporting is not on TransActioner. So yes, you have two different logins because one gives you full capabilities within TransActioner system, and when the agent you're supporting is not a subscriber of TransActioner, you're going to have the view that the client sees, the client parties see, and you'll have to log in through here to access all the transactions where your agent is not on TransActioner. And so your experience is going to be the same as what we saw with the client portal, where you're going to download those documents and upload them to the software platform that your agent uses to get signatures from your agent's clients. Tips and tricks and troubleshooting. So there are some neat tips and tricks that are helpful. The first one is when you're working with a listing, the agent is going to set up a transaction inside TransActioner first before it's on the MLS. So there's nothing to import from the MLS when they're just getting started, and they have to get that exclusive right to sell signed before it goes on the MLS. So now, how do you get that pretty image into TransActioner for that particular transaction? Well, if you go to the transactions overview page and click the edit button next to transaction details, then you can enter the MLS and import the MLS details, which will then provide the image. Click submit to save it. The other way to do it is under the edit image, click the edit there, and you can upload an image from your computer. So if you want it to look pretty and it's not on the MLS, you can still upload the image if you would like, but not necessary. Adding parties from existing people. Inside a transaction, go to the parties page and add a party to the transaction, and you want to be able to select from the drop-down list an existing person that you created in your people list. And that makes life a lot easier than having to retype a title or lender's information and their address and their company name and their phone number and all that. Copy versus duplicate. So copy makes a copy of the form so you can go back into editing mode, which means all signatures have to be removed because you're creating a new version that those people who have signed may or may not agree with. So signatures removed, you get a whole new copy, and you can go edit it again. Duplicate, on the other hand, is going to make a copy of the form keeping any signatures in place so you can add additional signatures. Two really great examples. This is really useful for something like the inspection objection form. If the buyers decide they want to withdraw, they need to keep their signatures in place and then add their signature to the withdrawal section of the form. This is also useful if the agent forgot to sign the document before sending it out for signatures to their clients, like the contract to buy and sell real estate form. Here you can make a duplicate, and then the agent can then drag and drop their signature field and date and any checkboxes they may have forgotten to do on the CBS. And it still keeps the buyer's signatures in place. Filling out versus getting signature. Now for forms where you want the client to fill it out before they sign it, we do separate it as two different steps. This is actually very helpful for a lot of clients who simply, because there are a lot of clients who will receive a document and just start signing without actually going through like they're supposed to and fill it out. For example, the seller's property disclosure. They're supposed to fill it out first before they do any signatures. So we set it up so that you would click their button, the seller button, to share it with them, and then they will have a fill out button in their client portal where they can fill out the SPD. Then coordinate with them when they are finished and ready to sign it. You can send it out for signatures the normal way. When to share. Once your client signs a document, the data is burned into the PDF and you can no longer edit it. Share documents with the other agent once your client and the agent, if applicable, are done signing. If your agent forgets to sign and they're supposed to sign a document and they sent a document out for signatures to their clients, after the clients sign, then the agent can create a duplicate, go to prepare signatures, and then select the checkbox for the name in the upper left menu, drag and drop their signature field into position and the date if necessary, and then click Save and Exit. When to share when it's a linked transaction. When you receive a document from the other agent in a linked transaction, you're going to have your own copy of that document. That way you can work with your clients to view and or sign when ready. After your clients sign, you will share that new signed version back with the other agent by clicking the agent button. Changing parties. Buyer and seller details are auto-populated only when you first select the fill-out form. If you add a second buyer or seller after opening a form with the fill-out option, you will need to add that second buyer or seller information manually. Or you could create a new version of the form to the transaction. Another scenario, if the email is incorrect on the second buyer or second seller in the transaction as your clients, you can delete that client and add them again with the correct email address entered. Then reshare all documents and deadlines with them. That way it goes to the new email. They will need to follow the link from the new email to set up a new password with this new email address, at least the first time. If it's the other side's buyers or sellers, you can delete them and re-add them and it's all fine because we're only using that to autofill the forms and we don't take in their email addresses for the other side's clients. Now, if the email is incorrect on the first listed buyer or seller of your client in a transaction, you will need to create a new transaction. Now, why is that? Well, because the way our security rules are to ensure integrity and security. So really be careful about that first buyer client or seller client that you got the right email for them before you go too deep into your transaction. TCs on the other side. If the other agent is on TransActioner, it is up to them to set things up correctly for their assistant and or TC. Your side will still want to keep track of who the assistant and TC are because you might be sending emails to them or calling them about the transaction. So you still want to add their information into the Parties tab so you have access to their information and save this with the transaction. Edit transaction details. When the status changes, or you got a contract date and closing date and sales price, you can, from the overview page of the transaction, click the edit icon button to edit the transaction. And at the top are the contract details where you can change the status from active listing to under contract or sold, the transaction name. You can add the sales price, contract date, and closing date. Those are the common things you're going to want to do. If it's for listings and you haven't imported the first photo to make it look really nice in TransActioner, then you can go ahead and add the MLS number in here, import the MLS details, and as a listing, it will grab that first photo and load it into TransActioner. Summary. TransActioner is better software than the other options out there, where you can extract deadlines from any PDF, DocuSign, CTM, handwritten dates. The sharing concept is quite novel compared to the other ones. Where you can share calendars and documents and contacts. The client portal is an amazing, fantastic experience for clients, title closers, and lenders, and make it really easy and intuitive for them to work and sign documents and fill out forms. TransActioner works great on phones for all different parties. It just makes it convenient if you happen to be out and about and need to do something, especially for clients when they go to sign documents. TransActioner keeps track of signatures and the status of the documents and is much more secure. There are a lot of features already implemented in TransActioner, and we keep building more based on the feedback that we get from you, from transaction coordinators, from agents, from clients, and everyone else who's using TransActioner. This is just simply a list that could fit on one slide. Some neat features we have when you add a new form at the top, you can access your templates. Then we also have suggested forms, which is based on where you are in the transaction. If you're not under contract yet, then you're probably looking for something like maybe the personal property agreement or post-closing occupancy agreement. But you certainly don't need the title objection notice form. So this is to help agents and TCs be more efficient and effective by helping them get to the right documents quicker. It also helps new agents because these are probably the ones that they need to look for as opposed to scrolling through all the forms available to them. Legal clauses are added to each account based on brokerages that have paid for legal clauses or other custom brokerage clauses that they wish to have included, and these can be copy-pasted into any of the contracts. Importing from the MLS will also import the listing agent information if it correctly imports from the MLS, which helps make things go quicker when you need to share documents with the other agent. Importing the MLS will also grab that first photo just to make everything look pretty inside the system. Quick scenario run-throughs. You can watch video walkthroughs of the software. These are available at youtube.com/@transactioner_com, C-O-M. Training docs available. There are a bunch of PDF step-by-steps and how-to scenarios currently on a Google Drive. We also have a 2-hour 2 CE credits course available that was approved by Dora. You can log in as a client on your phone if you're working with me through this demonstration. I have the login and password if you'd like to have a fun experience of what it's like to be a client. When I present at brokerages, offices, and team meetings, I typically have a handout for everyone. On one side is the "wow, that's cool" with a list of some cool features about TransActioner. And on the other side, I typically provide a demo account where they can log in and test the system and take a look at how the sharing works, and the emails are turned off on these demo accounts. As a TC, if you would like to have access to a demo account, just ask. I will be happy to provide one. So what should you do today? Your next steps? Well, start with the demo account. Get started today. Get yourself set up as a TC. Tell us what to build next. Everything we built for the TCs is based on the feedback and interviews we had with the TCs. And so we would love more feedback as we develop more things to help TCs and agents be more effective and efficient with their documents. Thank you. My contact information is Liz Bosey, 970-412-1020, liz@transactioner.com.